when you're writing a novel, it can be really helpful to have some sort of artificial structure within the book itself that provides a framework for the plot and the characters, something that generally guides the investment of the characters and that has an outcome and rules that your readers are already familiar with. This could be probably the most popular version of this in U.S. fiction is trial fiction, fiction that centers around legal trials. Some of the most popular fictions in U.S. literary history have major trial elements, since you can generally rely on the audience being familiar with the basic rules, the basic phases, and the import of what the heck is going on and what that implies about the story. And you can have twists and turns, and you can educate them about lesser known aspects of it. Earl Stanley Gardner's Perry Mason series, which of course inspired the well-known TV show with Raymond Burr, is maybe one of the exemplars of that. Usually half or more of the books is devoted to trial sequences and to the ins and outs of legal court procedure, and this gives the books, a tremendously straightforward and familiar framework. Probably a reason that the author was able to write so many of them, and they did so well. John Grisham in the 90s and the aughts, of course, took good measure of this phenomenon, wrote some of the most popular fictional trials ever. Other artificial frameworks, though, are often used. The framework of, say, an artistic production, like a play, a movie, a concert, where there's a generally understood beginning and end. Sports, some of my favorite early books revolved around sports tournaments or seasons. There was a lot of fiction for boys when I was growing up, specifically built around sports, and there were many series that allowed you to sort of track the characters as they aged and as they took on different roles. But grounding it always was, the game, the series, the season, that gave a kind of structure to the book that you could rely on, as the audience knew at some point you were going to get to the end. One of the lesser frameworks that I've seen used in fiction, but when it is can be very effective, is the game book, similar to the sports book, but more focused on single games. And the author that I think did this as well as anybody is Walter Tevis. Walter Tevis wrote 6 books. 3 of them were game books, 3 of them were science fiction, and of those 6, 4 of them have been adapted into very successful films or television, which is a pretty good ratio for anybody. I would say that probably beats even Stephen King, for example. Walter Tevis wrote, on the science fiction side, The Man Who Fell to Earth, a book called Mockingbird, and a book called The Steps of the Sun. The latter two have not been adapted yet, but maybe once his success rate gets better known, someone will take them on. They certainly could be turned into pretty good visual fictions. But then his games books, his first was called The Hustler. It was adapted into a movie with Paul Newman from the early 60s that was something of a minor classic. Then The Queen's Gambit, which has recently been adapted into some sort of hugely successful TV miniseries. I didn't actually see it, so I won't be able to talk about that side of it, but I recall the book quite well. And The Color of Money, which served as a sequel to The Hustler. These are not long books. They tend to be a little on the shorter side, 200 pages perhaps, and they all center around characters who have made a game the focus of their life. In the case of The Hustler and The Color of Money, of course, it's pool, billiards, and in The Queen's Gambit, it's chess. Just talk about each of these in turn and how far along they take their stories and how the game serves the story. So in The Hustler, uh, Fast Eddie Felson is the main character, and he's the one who's played by Paul Newman in the movie. If you ever see it, it's a good movie. You should check it out. And the book is strong. This is the story of sort of a young man who is really good at what he's doing. He's talented. He's worked hard, but he has a ways to go in order to learn how to be a success at what he's chosen to do. Similar to, oh, there's so many stories like this. The movie Cars comes to mind with Lightning McQueen, the really talented hotshot who needs to learn some more lessons before he can um, really put all the pieces together and discover what it takes to succeed. Talent is not enough, ambition is not enough, those sorts of lessons. In The Hustler, Fast Eddie's been a pool hustler since he was small. He's essentially an orphan, and pool has become his life. It's all he does. He doesn't have opinions on much else. And since pool has become his life, he's been able to make progress quite quickly, and he's gotten to the point that he can challenge the top hustler in the United States, who's Minnesota Fats. Minnesota Fats was not a real person, although one hustler did claim to be him. Tevis made a point of saying this. He's like, I made him up. He's a made-up person. So Minnesota Fats represents sort of the champion. And Fast Eddie Felson is the challenger. And he faces off against Minnesota Fats. And he loses because despite his talent, he has not learned important lessons about how to become champion yet. A couple of these then occur throughout the book as he picks up the lessons that he needs so that he can challenge Fats again at the end of the book. And he's taken under the wing of an underworld figure, a mentor, who wants to make money off of Eddie's talent, and does see that Eddie's talented but not yet ready for the big time, and so takes him on the road to sort of teach him some of the things that he still needs to learn. One of the most interesting things that he teaches him, they arrange a match with a kind of talented amateur rich guy, and the idea is that Eddie will beat him, and they'll win a lot of money. And one of the interesting things that Eddie has to learn before, when he was younger, he was so good at pool that he did not need to develop much of a drive to win. He was good enough to beat people on skill and talent, but he did not make winning like the drive of the activity. It was more, the enjoyment of the game itself and his pleasure at being good at it. And since pool is the kind of game where you're not directly competing against another person, you're in competition with them, but it's not like wrestling or something. You're engaged in a situation in which they are a competitor, and you want to control the situation and manipulate it to your advantage, but you're not like physically tussling with them or something. He's able to get by on this. So when he's playing this guy, he discovers inside himself the importance of simply winning. Of that sounds odd to say, but of like beating this person. That you need to want to win. This is a sort of uncomfortable lesson for him, but he takes it to it, and he brings it on. It becomes part of his sort of repertoire of skill as a player, is the ability to focus on defeating this person. It gives him the kind of endurance that he's going to need to take on Fats, because these games, among top players can last hours and hours and hours. They imply, even days, if necessary, if the players are skilled enough. And without sort of the drive to just win, to sort of keep you stubbornly holding there, you'll flake out like Eddie does against Fats at the beginning. Another thing that it turns out you need the other main lesson he learns. There's a part of the story involving a young woman who's attracted to Eddie and Eddie to her, and there's tension over, Eddie's ability to play as an expression of sort of his life, almost his art, and Eddie's ability to win as a way of making money. There's that kind of tension between art and commerce in the book, and what Eddie learns eventually is essentially to lock away the elements of your life when you're playing the game that are not helping you. He's sort of compartmentalization. He learns to sort of lock himself down, his feelings about this young woman, about the future, about the money. He just locks it away and becomes a sort of billiards playing machine. He faces Fats again and he wins, but at the price of sort of taking any deep joy in the achievement. Um, this is a pretty, this is a reasonably common human experience. I would say it's that moment when something that you used to like now becomes something that you have to do for work, whether you like it or not. The writer Hunter S. Thompson, when he was once asked if he enjoyed writing, wrote something like, in response, he's like, "Of course I don't." He's like, I have liked writing, but nothing's fun when you have to do it or you don't eat. Eddie sort of achieves something of that attitude. Now he can eat. He's the champion, but pool has stopped being fun. It's implied that it hasn't been fun for Fats, that Fats also has been that kind of pool playing champion machine. It's just that Eddie's beat him now and he can't do it again. Fats almost seems to see this as a little bit of a relief, but we'll get back to that. So it's a little bit of a dark games book, because Eddie also doesn't know how to feel about the role of commerce in his life, and he's not sure if he really wants to play pool for money like this, now that it's no longer something that he can sort of feel deep joy in. And the underworld figure that he's in with tells him, look, it's this or nothing. Like, if you want to play pool for money, like, I've got the connections to lock you out, and if you won't play for me, you're not going to play for anybody. So Eddie chooses to be locked out, and the book kind of ends. It's pretty dark. It's pretty sad. Something that someone had done for fun. And, like other games novels or sports novels, it's sort of implied that playing the game is a symbol or an analog for life itself. So a young man who was doing something creative in a disciplined way and was great at it bumps up against the roof of it and finds that at the top there's just money and turning part of yourself into a machine. And he says goodbye. No way. This should sound familiar to people familiar with other books from the late 50s. There's a little bit of crossover with other ideas from, say, the Beat writers. This rejection of, engaging in the economy, just becoming a money-making machine, even if you have to leave your art behind. I wouldn't make too much of that, but there's definitely some parallels, some feeling that creative work is denied you because of sort of the corrupting role of commerce and what you have to do in order to succeed at it. Okay, so setting that down. And then Tevis, I believe, just for some biographical stuff, I believe didn't really write another book for a while. I think The Man Who Fell to Earth he wrote in the 60s, but then he didn't write anything else until the 80s. All of the last 4 books that he wrote came at the very end of his life. He died in, I think it was 1984, 1985. He was not very old. He taught writing and English at the University of Kentucky, so like a lot of people who could not find a way to make a living in the art market, he moved into academia. But at the end, he did write these books, and they're all pretty good. So moving on, The Queen's Gambit. Queen's Gambit is a story of Beth Harmon. Beth is also a de facto orphan, I think literally an orphan in the book. She grows up in an orphanage, and because of that, is sort of free to sort of pick her own destiny. She doesn't have to pay the debts that we all owe to our families. She's like a free agent. And she's quite young, 7 or 8 when the book starts. And she finds out that the janitor at her orphanage is a amateur chess player. He plays games that he does chess problems. He has magazines in his closet. He'll like play out games. You get the impression he might, play games by mail. He's good. He's serious about it. And she sees this, and at first, of course, she just watches him. She doesn't know why she's drawn to this board. Like so many of us, we don't know why we're drawn to something when we're drawn to it, or where it might lead us. And of course, eventually she notices a move that he should make, and he doesn't believe it, but she shows him how the move will lead to victory, and he takes note of this. It's not demonstrative. He doesn't become a surrogate father or anything. He's just that first glimpse. He's that first door into chess. So he lets her play chess with him and read his magazines and so on. And she eventually becomes a player and turns out to be a chess prodigy. And he, or I don't remember every detail, I'm sorry to say, but somehow she gets pulled into the world of amateur chess in her community. And the book then is again similar to Eddie's, but Queen's Gambit is a superior book, partly because I think Tevis is a better writer by this point, partly because it's longer and it has a larger cast of characters, and it's a little more willing to explore what it's like for a games player to sort of have to negotiate their way into the universe of this game, of the people who watch it, who organize it, who play it, without a lot of guidance. Beth finds bits of guidance here and there from the janitor, but ultimately is on her own. I think this is part of what people are drawn to about her as a character, is that she's very unaided of the characters in in fiction. She's got to be one of the ones who does the most by herself and has to explore and rely on herself to a pretty high degree. There are some really excellent scenes in the book. One of my favorites is she's going to high school and she becomes like a local chess champion, and she gets her name in the paper and a little bit of reputation at the school, and she's invited to join this kind of high school. It's not a sorority, but it's like a sorority. It's like a private club of like the movers and shakers in the school, and the idea is like this is exclusive and cool, and only the kids from the top families join this. And she goes to one of their meetings, and she's bored stupid because they don't actually do anything. It's like they're exclusive purely for the purpose of being exclusive. They don't actually do anything. They just kind of sit around in their nice clothes and complain about their mothers, and she's bored silly and she doesn't go back. A lot of what Beth does is test other areas of life against the pull of chess, and always winds up going back to chess. And within chess, she finds there's sort of the question of what is she going to like allow into her game? What is she going to let affect how she approaches chess, and what isn't she? What does she need and what does she resist? So, for example, she has in this scene with the faux sorority, she has the offer of, say, fame, of access to fame through her skill at this game, and she rejects it because it's sterile to her. She gets older and she continues working on her game and looking for new partners. And of course, if you get high enough in chess, this is pre-internet, so you can't just schedule a match with what's that, Magnus? What's that guy from Norway? He's Carlsen. You can't just schedule a match with Carlsen online. You have to actually go somewhere, which pulls her to New York. And she, gets into the chess community there, and they start testing her game and her skill. They do various challenges that she succeeds at, like playing multiple players at once, and she starts building up her background. She finds a mentor figure, a guy who's a little older than her, who just really puts her through the paces of chess analysis. They just analyze games over and over and over, just building up her chess sense, like her background of games. Because even people who are really good, they need experience. He develops feelings for her. She kind of does for him. She struggles with alcoholism and addiction because there's this sense that chess is not yet enough for her. Chess is not enough, and there isn't anything come along that she has access to. She's a fairly lonely figure throughout the entire book. That would be my read. Like, even in the chess world, she's guarded and unsure. Her skills get strong enough, though, that she is invited to participate in a tournament in Russia. And this is like early 80s, this book, so this is still the Soviet Union. Russia's reputation in chess is still unparalleled despite Bobby Fischer. Russia is still where you can find like the largest number of top players, and they make a point of stressing this through the book. Russia's kind of like the top level. It's like Russia, Soviet Union, they pay people to play chess over there. This kind of thing. So Beth's efforts to go to this tournament and to succeed are seen as ambitious. And she's done her work, though. She's pretty good, and she gets an offer of help from one of these kind of like moral majority Christian crusade against communism type places. They want to use her. They'll give her like money and logistical support, but in exchange, they're going to like turn her story into propaganda, and she resists that very strongly. Beth doesn't give long reasons for why she does things. She doesn't articulate them very much. This is very true to her character. She's very quiet. She thinks things through, and just on some kind of level that's hidden to the reader, it makes her kind of enigmatic, and other people are left to react to her, and she feels things deeply, but she doesn't articulate them easily through action. Everything keeps bringing her back to the board. This is one of the great pleasures of game novels or sports novels or any novels that center around some sort of artificial performance within the book itself, is to watch the things that happen within the performance affect the person's life outside, and vice versa. To watch the way that what's going on in the player's life, whether it affects their performance or not. If so, how? Does anger and disappointment make them a worse player? Does it make them a different player? Does it shift them from one state to the other? These are like some of the greatest pleasures of this kind of fiction, because it's something that we pretty much all experienced, is that even when we're not participating, it's something that could formally be called a performance, like a chess match or a theatrical performance. We do have that feeling of like sometimes we're on stage and sometimes we're off. And what happens off stage, how does it affect what happens on stage? And vice versa. What do we do when the things that happen to us on stage have to be managed, and then we go off stage? Do we then let ourselves feel them? Do we reject them? Do we keep a hard wall between those experiences, or just the thinnest of little gauzy curtains that we can see through, almost? These are some of the great pleasures of these kinds of books, and watching Beth, who's a young person through the whole book, what will they let in that affects their game? Beth considers giving up chess completely at different moments, which even the top performers in a given field must do sometimes. And what pulls Beth back, what pulls other top performers back, it's really fascinating. So Beth goes to the tournament, and plays some of the top people. They've built up this one guy, I believe his name is Borgoff. He's like, he's the champion. He's the Minnesota Fats of the tale. They haven't met before, but Beth has studied his play and this kind of thing. One advantage they suggest that Beth has is that Beth's play is kind of hidden from the Russian masters because it's not very accessible for them, whereas she's able to find some examples of their play. She gets some last minute help, and by studying their play, of course, you get a better knowledge of how to play them. So she fights her way through the tournament, and she faces Borgoff in the finale. And the finale's done very well. Tevis doesn't hang too much of the story onto the mechanics of the game itself. It doesn't happen in the Fast Eddie Felsen books, and it doesn't happen too much here. If you know the games, of course, you can get a little bit of extra enjoyment out of them, but you don't really need to know the games well to enjoy the fiction, because it's more about how the players are playing and how they're reacting to each other and what's affecting them and what isn't. And in chess tournaments, moves are timed. You don't have infinite time to think, and this is agreed on beforehand. So, at this final game between Borgoff and Beth, I don't remember exactly, but let's imagine that it's like 2 hours. You have 2 hours of thinking time to use. So after the other players move, they hit your clock and your thinking time begins. So one thing that Beth had to learn was clock management, how to manage your thinking time, and how to what to use when to sort of go deep into your chess sense, if you will, and when to play quickly. And now I don't play chess much, but you can see how important this would be, right? It's very different when you have 2 hours of total thinking time to when you have, say, like 3 minutes, which I think they do in speed chess sometimes. It's a very different game. So there's a really good build in the final game. Despite the fact that Beth's made it all the way to Borgoff, you still have this, because of Tevis's structure, you still have a strong feeling that she is the underdog, and they're doing okay, and then they get to about move 25, and Beth has this really strong intuition that this is it. The position on the board, this move, is going to define the match. That right there shows you what a good player she is, because to get that sense of it and then to trust it really shows deep understanding of a game. She's got 30 minutes left on her clock, and something like that anyway, and she just sort of closes her eyes and goes deep inside herself and thinks the position through in silence for like 25 minutes. Like, uses almost all of her remaining time in the match on this one move. And it's a beautifully drawn. This was the point where sometimes a novel can almost become like a painting. You can see it like as a still shot. You just imagine these guys in these Soviet commissar outfits, and maybe this like one little circle of light where Beth is sitting across from Borgoff and the board between them, and this young American woman just eyes shut, doing the chess, trusting herself, not rushing, all about the chess, nothing else. And of course she comes out of it with the correct move, and she wins, and Borgoff hugs her because he's so moved by the chess experience and the chess sense just displayed, and he is another player like her, and he realizes like the depth of investment and love that represents, and he's deeply moved by it. It's great. It's fun. It's nice. It's our reward for all those pages of worrying about her and her drinking and her loneliness, is that moment, that aesthetic moment when it pays off. And I am enough of an optimist about artistic experience, and I'm defining that broadly to include games playing and athletics and sports playing and stuff, to believe that there are those moments where it was all worth it. When you see like the tears on a champion's face when they win that trophy that they've been looking for, or when they make that shot, or when they hit that mark. It's a deep and lasting pleasure. And the book is written third person, which is best for these kind of things. You're not in Beth's head the whole time; it would cheapen it. So you get to experience it, experience her joy vicariously with very light touches. It isn't overplayed or anything. And then there's a tiny bit of denouement at the end of the book, and the book ends with a scene. Beth hasn't gone back to the U.S. The U.S. yet, and is still in Moscow or wherever it is, and goes down to the park and sees an old man playing chess, and asks him if he'd like to have a game. And that's like the final line. It's like, would you like a game of chess? It's like the end of War Games. Maybe the guys who wrote War Games read Queen's Gambit. I don't know. More. But the scene is written in a way that's like wholesome. That final scene. It's written in a way that's like reasonably hopeful that Beth has sorted out her relationship to her own talent and her own life, and is ready to simply play the game. It does not have to be in a tournament anymore. She invites the guy to play the game in a very kind of like straightforward, polite way, where it's clear that she's got her sense of her own talent sorted out in her mind and is ready to simply use it for a bit of fun, which is what games are supposed to provide. When we strip away all that we invest in them, they're supposed to be fun. There isn't that frenzied connection to it she felt when it was like all that was going on in her life. There isn't that burden of pressure when they realized how good she is to like develop it correctly or to use it in the right way so as not to fail. It's just a game of chess. It's kind of a quiet little vision of what art can offer the people who make it, is these formal activities that help us sort out just what we're going to do with ourselves. Of course, another way of looking at it, and this is part of the charm of it for me, another way of looking at it is as potentially a little sad, because she's in Moscow, she's this young woman, and she could do other things. They sort of imply she doesn't have to just kind of wander around playing chess, and so that maybe now her horizons are quite narrow and become focused on chess to the exclusion of other things like just camaraderie, friendship, love, just general curiosity about the world. That maybe the price that the people who are excellent at a formal pursuit like chess pay is less time and attention for anything else. That would certainly also be a possible message. But I think in general, for where we leave Beth as a character, it's meant to be positive. And if Tevis had followed up and written another book about her, perhaps he would have delved into that. Later in life, is chess enough? Is a life built around even being best at a activity that's generally valued by a lot of people? Is that enough for a good human life? I imagine there might be some. It's tempting to imagine that there's a little bit of Tevis here with his own writing, wondering if writing his books and doing his own art is enough. Anyway, he didn't get to the point of that with Beth Harmon. There's only the one book about Beth. But he did visit the issue again with Fast Eddie Felsen. And if you take Fast Eddie Felsen and Beth Harmon as more or less the same character, they're the games player. You're just meeting them at different points and contexts in their life. The games player, orphan, who has no prior obligations to the past and is in a position to give everything to a game. We do get the last book about Fast Eddie, The Color of Money, and that was turned into a movie by Martin Scorsese with a young Tom Cruise and an older Paul Newman playing the character of Fast Eddie again. I think that was in 1987, something like that. It's one of the lesser-known Martin Scorsese movies, but I think it's quite good, and it's fun to see Tom Cruise playing a supporting role for almost the last time in his life. I think this must have been just before Top Gun came out and he became the star. Because, anyway, we'll talk about it. There are significant differences between the book and the movie, but the general structure is similar. Fast Eddie has not played pool seriously for 25 years, and he's now a middle-aged man. In the book, parts of the story I think are done better, and in the movie, other parts I think are done better. So if I dodge from one to the other, it's just because they're kind of one big mess in my head. But we'll try to stick with the book. Fast Eddie goes to Minnesota Fats, who is retired, and they are quite friendly now. And Fast Eddie needs his help. He's been running a pool hall. He doesn't play, but he's still in the game. The game is still sort of like the centerpiece of his life, even if it's making it happen for others instead of playing it himself. And he goes to Minnesota Fats because he's broke. He's lost his pool hall and he needs to know what to do next. And Minnesota Fats is retired and takes him on a boat by his house, and they have a chat. And Minnesota Fats tells him, look, go play pool. You need money. Go play pool. Win money playing pool. And he says, I can't. The underworld. He's like, no, I don't mean any of that. He's like, times are different now. He's like, go play legit. Play in tournaments for prize money and win money playing for prize money. And this is where we learn that Eddie's doubts about himself are deeper now. It's not just that he is afraid of the underworld connection or anything. It's that he doesn't, think he can do it anymore. He doesn't think he can play pool and win like that anymore. The pieces that he had when he was young, that sort of brashness, the talent, the confidence, and the drive to win, they're all weaker. They're all weaker now. And Fats knows this, but he also intuits that that's kind of what Eddie needs to find again if he's going to carry on. He needs to find those pieces that he lost, because playing the game is life itself in these books for the games player, for the dedicated games player. And if you lose the game, you're lost. So Fats sees it as, Eddie needs to live again. Minding the pool hall, he wasn't really living. He was just kind of marking time. In the movie, they have Eddie turned into a liquor salesman, which, given alcohol's well-known use as a depressant, fills something of the same role. Eddie's just been marking time. He's been alive, but not living. So back to the book, Eddie looks into it and begins piece by piece to put his game back together, to put his play back together. He finds that he's, still pretty good. He has a match with another hustler and manages to win. He meets a woman who's attracted to him and who loves the idea of just going out and making a bunch of money playing pool. He gets a job managing a student union, I think in Kentucky, so Tevis might have used his own experiences at universities there, and he pulls all of the tables apart and rebuilds them so that the students can play billiards again. He gets fired by a guy at the union who doesn't like that he did that without permission. He tries to discover a new kind of game, which in his case turns out to be running an art gallery. This part of the book is a little bit of a left turn, but it makes some sense. The idea being, what if there was something else I was as good at as I was playing pool? And he does have a talent for it, and he's successful for a while, but I don't want forces intervene. He can't keep it going, but he likes it. It fits the same hole in his life as pool did. This idea of working really hard for a brief period and then making a bunch of money all at once. Making an art sale is similar to a high dollar pool match in his mind. Eventually, though, he realizes that Fats is right, and he just needs to go in on the legitimate circuit. So he enters the tournaments, and bit by bit, he fights his way back into the game. He doesn't struggle with the same stuff he struggled with in The Hustler. He's not a young man anymore. So he doesn't struggle with not knowing how to win. He doesn't struggle with not knowing how to do it. He struggles with whether he still can. He struggles with those feelings that he's out of date, that he's useless, that he's um, destined to lose, that these younger people have something better on him. And he keeps, succeeding. And he gets to the end and he's playing the current champion. And they have this scene in the bathroom where the current champion reveals that one way he's been relying on drugs. He's been he's been relying on drugs. He like holds out one of his pills or something and says to Fast Eddie is like, "You're gonna lose, man. This is gonna make you lose." And Eddie just slaps him. um, there's a certain amount of Eddie becoming not just the player of the game but the defender of the game. There are different bits in the book where people disrespect billiards or treat it shabbily, and Eddie is hurt by this and stands up against it. So when he's in the student union, for example, and he's repairing the billiards tables because they're worn out, he's offended that the guy who runs the place didn't do it before him and let people, ignore these shabby tables, because of course you need good tables if you're going to learn to love the game, right? So he puts all this effort into repairing them, and the students take to it, and Eddie's happy for a while because he wants the game to thrive. So this is one way you get back into the game, and one way that you overcome some of those feelings of turning your play into work is you set standards for the game itself, and you devote yourself to defending them, to doing the game right. And this is more of an experienced player's attitude, is I'm not just playing the game to win. I know how to do that. Now I'm playing the game to win and to make the game better, to show people the right way to play it, to make it possible for them to play it as well as they can by, literally keeping the equipment in good repair, or encouraging younger players and showing people that this is something worth doing. Similar to the Queen's Gambit, one after the scene in the bathroom where he slaps the current champion for being a drug addict, maybe addict, drug user. Then we get this moment of sort of aesthetic joy in the play, similar to the moment in the Queen's Gambit when Beth uses almost all of her thinking time on the right move in order to win the match. Eddie goes on a rush of success and wins the last match in the tournament because he's figured out his attitude towards the game, and he's satisfied his internal questions and the external pressures on him, and he can just play. And there's a passage in there that Tevis says that stuck with me that was really well. He's like, because fundamentally this is a very simple game. It's a stick, a table, and some balls. It should be easy. And he has that feeling of sort of flow, we might call it now, that just simple ability to play that he probably felt at the start of his career, all the way back at the beginning of The Hustler, that feeling of this is something that I'm here to do. This is just right. This is what I want. And he doesn't even remember the point at which he wins the match. He's just so into the sport. And that's the kind of performance that helps the game, because people who see it recognize now what you've achieved, and they will want something of that for himself. The way that, Beth wanted something of what chess gave to that janitor, and Eddie wanted something of what pool gave to the people when he was a boy way back, is they want that sort of disciplined joy that performance in formal structures like games can give us. Is within limits, this is what's accomplishable. You need the limits, strangely, to give that feeling of unlimited skill, because the world is too big and too much with us. It needs to be condensed down and distilled down to a game board or a billiard table, so that we can then see, because we're so bad at seeing one thing, so that we can then see the joy and the intricacy of the way our minds mesh with matter and with reality. Walter Tevis, Games Novels.